Hello and welcome. This is everything you need to know for Week 9 fantasy football. We'll highlight everything we saw in Week 8 and what you need to know going forward. All right, Evan, let's start with the biggest injury of the week, and this one was a real gut punch. Kirk Cousins tears his Achilles, will be out for the year. In the wake of that, they go out and make a trade here today. They give up a late round pick to acquire Josh Dobbs. Of course, we've seen Josh Dobbs come in and start games quickly before, pick up systems quickly in the past. Before, they also have Jaron Hall. They have guys like Nick Mullins. But for now, it looks like Jaron Hall this week, and then hopefully, presumably, Josh Dobbs after that. Your reaction to the Kirk Cousins injury, the Josh Dobbs trade, anything else here?
Well, it stinks for Kirk Cousins on a personal level because his contract is up after this season. It may also increase the chances that Kirk Cousins just stays in Minnesota and he comes a little bit more affordably because they don't have, Josh Dobbs isn't a long-term answer. He's maybe a stopgap. Jaron Hall, 5th-round pick out of BYU, kind of undersized, not the strongest arm. He's, an extreme long shot to become the answer for Minnesota. I thought it was interesting, like the Vikings were kind of buyers and kind of sellers because they traded their starting left guard, Ezra Cleveland, to Jacksonville. So, I mean, how do you feel about how they're going to play it out? I think there was a report from Rap Sheet that Justin Jefferson's recovery has been going as expected or even maybe better than expected. Do you think they're going to try to stay competitive? What are they going to do here?
Yeah, I think they're going to toe the line of mediocrity, and that's like the worst place to be. But you have to look your team in the eye in the locker room. It's hard in the NFL. Like, you can't go out there with horrific quarterback play and expect to keep the locker room. So I think getting Dobbs makes sense. My concern from a fantasy perspective is obviously Kirk Cousins was one of the most fantasy-friendly quarterbacks in the entire NFL for pass catchers. So there's a downgrade there. There's also some downgrade in, like, why should Justin Jefferson rush back or play at 90% or 95% to play for a team that's clearly going nowhere now with Josh Dobbs? So there's certainly some concern there. I had a ton of Addison in best ball. I took a ton of Hawkinson in season long in shallower leagues where I was trying to get tight end stuff. So yeah, I'm just gut punched on it, man. It's just really, really bad. And we've seen a lot of quarterback injuries that have been really bad this year, including obviously Aaron Rodgers, which messed up all the Jets stuff, and Anthony Richardson, which was painful also. So yeah, certainly not good. They did win this game 24-10 in Green Bay, but yeah, it's just major downgrades across the board. Go to Arizona. They lose 31-24 to the Ravens at home. The big story here was the Trey McBride breakout. I want to get to that in a second. The bigger story for right now is that they have traded away Josh Dobbs, as we just talked about, and Kyler Murray appears to be on the brink of his return. It will either be Kyler Murray or Clayton Tune as the Cardinals starter this week. We are, for now, projecting Kyler Murray to be the starter there. What do you think of Kyler Murray's return here, Evan? Kyler should be an immediate add for anyone who had Kirk Cousins, obviously, if he's available. What do you think about the Cardinals stuff going forward now?
So Kyler Murray obviously coming back from the double knee ligament tear. I had heard that the Cardinals' plan all along was to bring him back in Week 10 against Atlanta, but he progressed faster than expected. There were reports that it was likely to be Clayton Tune this week, but I think that they're going to take it day by day, and I do think that there's a chance that Clayton Tune does start and then Kyler Murray plays, but I also think that, or at least that Kyler Murray is the number 2 this week and is active. I think he's definitely starting by Week 10, and I think it has a chance to be a really big upgrade for Marquise Brown, whose rate of uncatchable targets is the second highest in the league so far this year. Another note, James Conner will be eligible to return in Week 10. And if people forgot about him on the waiver wire, he is absolutely worth picking up with improvement projected for the Arizona offense when Kyler Murray takes over.
Yeah, and so I'm a little worried. Kyler Murray, obviously mobility is a huge calling card for him. I'm worried about that out of the gate. But man, if you're desperate at quarterback right now, you could certainly do worse. The other story in this game, though, I alluded to, Trey McBride. I mean, finally, Evan. I mean, I had taken this guy so many times in best ball on the assumption that Zach Ertz would be completely dusted. Arizona decided not to do that. Zach Ertz get hurt in the first full game of Trey McBride's 2023 season. Plays 62 of 76 snaps, 29 inline, 27 slot snaps, 6 wide, runs 36 routes on 41 Josh Dobbs dropbacks, 14 targets for a 38% target share, catches 10 balls for 95 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, I don't want to go overboard here because a ton of this was in garbage time. He was running like one route and they were giving it to him because it was garbage time. But still, we think Trey McBride can play, and there is not a lot of competition here for targets. And Kyler Murray, going back to last year, was even targeting Zach Ertz a ton. Obviously, they've targeted the tight end position a ton this year. So we talked a ton about Trey McBride on the waiver show. That is up now. You guys should check that out. But Evan, wanted to get your take on Trey McBride and his rest of season outlook at the tight end position.
Yeah, and you can, say we should downgrade Trey McBride because his production occurred in garbage time. Guess what? Guess what team is the likeliest in the NFL to have garbage time the rest of the way? The Cardinals would be up there. So you've got Michael Wilson kind of established as the rookie third round pick on the outside. Marquise Brown obviously is your number one, and Rondale Moore really does not have a big role whatsoever in their passing game. So Trey McBride like has a chance to own the middle of the field in Arizona the rest of the way. I think you got an every week fantasy starter, quite possibly, especially with Kyler coming back.
Yeah, I mean, we did some things on the waiver show, like would you rather have Njoku or McBride? I thought that one was like super close. Would you rather have McBride or Kincaid? I thought that was close, but I wouldn't blame anyone for going Kincaid there. So yeah, there's certainly, that's like, I think the range that McBride will be in though the rest of the year.
I would go Kincaid, McBride, Njoku.
Okay, fair. Let's go to the Seattle stuff. So they get a late win here over PJ Walker, kind of a miracle win. They went really throw heavy against the Browns here. And I feel like that was the game plan. We're talking 39 times Geno Smith dropped back here against 15 designed runs in this game for the backs. And as part of that, the first real sign of a role ascension for Zach Charbonnet came. Kenneth Walker came into this game with a calf issue, but he was not on the injury report for the final injury report. Charbonnet ends up outsnapping Kenneth Walker 33-24. Routes were Charbonnet 22, Walker 11. Opportunities, Walker 10, Charbonnet 7. Pete Carroll was asked about this after the game and said this was not due to injury. This was just, we wanted to get Zach Charbonnet a look. He was playing well. We stuck with him. That kind of surprises me a little bit considering how well Walker has been playing. Evan, what was your reaction to the Walker Charbonnet stuff and anything else on Seattle?
Well, Charbonnet really got it going like in the second half, which made me wonder if the injury, the soft tissue muscle injury, was the cause of Kenneth Walker maybe bowing out a little bit and letting Charbonnet take over, and then Charbonnet kind of showed the hot hand and they rode him. That's kind of how I envisioned it. So I don't know what to think as we move forward. But, I mean, we'll just have to look at the injury report and try to figure it out. I mean, Charbonnet has been, he was good in this game. And he took advantage of that opportunity. And Seattle historically is a team that rewards players that take advantage of opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't think Walker did anything to really lose his role, though, which is why it's a bit confusing and why maybe the injury had something to do with it. But, yeah, I mean, cat is out of the bag at least a little bit now on Zach Charbonnet. Certainly should be owned in all leagues at this point. Panthers, fourth story of the week. They get their first win. Shout out to the Panthers, and they do it. And I guess a controversial spot somewhat because obviously they took Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. Bryce Young gets his first NFL win over CJ Stroud. Now, the fantasy story here was the Panthers, who signed Miles Sanders to a $25 million contract this offseason, $13 million guaranteed. Just a month and a half into the season, they decide, oh, Chuba Hubbard's the better option. Snaps in this game, Chuba Hubbard 45, Miles Sanders 12. Opportunities, Chuba Hubbard 17, Miles Sanders 2. And I had a big fade on Miles Sanders this offseason, and this is not the way I expected to win it. I expected to win it with just straight inefficiency. I did not expect to win it, that fade, with him getting straight bench. So what was your reaction to the Panthers deciding to effectively bench Miles Sanders? Anything else on the Panthers?
Well, we talked about it on Friday. I mean, that the pendulum was clearly swinging in the direction of Chuba Hubbard. Also, Raheem Blackshear mixed in more than usual here. I mean, he didn't really do anything, but I mean, he played I think 10 or 12 snaps. So it became a little bit of a three-man backfield, and Miles Sanders was the clear number 2. He ran a bad route on a 4th and 2 play that messed up. And, again, it's always something with Miles Sanders, whether it be an injury. He was dealing with a shoulder injury, a fumble, a miscue. And I feel like they feel like they can trust Chuba Hubbard, and they need to protect their literally little number 1 overall rookie quarterback. And so I feel like they probably feel more comfortable doing that with Chuba Hubbard right now. One note that I made on this game is that Tommy Tremble took over as the Panthers' number 1 tight end. They used 3 tight ends: Tommy Tremble, Hayden Hurst, and Steven Sullivan. But Hayden Hurst was down to 33% of the snaps. Tommy Tremble was up to 54% of the snaps. He plays a ton on special teams. So we'll see if he can get to become that every down tight end. He did catch a touchdown here, only had 2 catches in the game. But Hayden Hurst hadn't been doing anything since the week 1 game, and it appears that there was a little bit of a changing of the guard there.
For sure. And yeah, they came out of the bye with a new coordinator. We talked about how maybe that wasn't great for Adam Thielen. Like, Adam Thielen's role can only get worse. It can't get any better. Of course, in this game, 11 more targets, 35% target share, just more of the same from Adam Thielen, who's been awesome this year and continues to be, even with the new play caller. There was a lot of smoke around Terrace Marshall at the trade deadline. Doesn't look like anything got done there, and Terrace Marshall will remain a Carolina Panther. Titans is our 5th and final biggest story of the week. Man, this was exciting. Will Levis comes in and balls out 19 of 29 for 238 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions in a win over the Falcons. I mean, just an awesome debut for a guy that fantasy Twitter hated. And honestly, the NFL didn't like very much. I mean, if you're a good quarterback, you do not last the second round. Or if you're a good quarterback in the eyes of the NFL, you do not last till the second round, like Will Levis did. I know a lot of people thought he would go first round. He has all the tools. If you want to see all his throws, I tweeted, somebody did a video of all his throws. Go to my Twitter. You can see every throw that Will Levis made. What did you think of Will Levis's debut, Evan? And how does that play out the rest of the season for the Titans?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was, pretty fun. Because, and what he reminded me just in this particular game of old Josh Freeman. And I'm not comparing him to Josh Freeman. Josh Freeman fell out of the league largely for off-field concerns. But back in the day when he would play with Big Mike Williams, there were like 4 Big Mike Williams, by the way, and Vincent Jackson, and he would kind of just toss the ball up like to DeAndre Hopkins and Westbrook Ikine, they'd go get it. And then the vast majority of the other passes were like short passes. But that Tampa Bay offense in those years, they made some big plays down the football field, and that's what the Titans did on Sunday. I'll be very interested to see how it goes against Pittsburgh this Thursday night, because the Steelers obviously will have had some time to prepare for this. A full start under Will Levis's belt, and they can really get after the passer, and the Titans have a weak offensive line. So I'm really interested to see how this goes, because this was a very exciting debut for a rookie quarterback in not the easiest situation.
Seemed like his debut was a good chance for them to trade Ryan Tannehill, right? It's like, oh, why don't we just let Will Levis develop the rest of the year? We'll get what we can from Ryan Tannehill. Probably can't get much from Ryan Tannehill, but no move is made. Derrick Henry's still on this team. DeAndre Hopkins is still on this team. Ryan Tannehill is still on this team coming out of the deadline. The Levis stuff reminds me so much of Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, just like clearly talented guys who people hated or scouts hated for some reason. But like, man, talented QB position is just so hard to come by. And I love that the Titans have taken swings. They took a swing on Malik Willis, took a swing on Will Levis. Like the Eagles took a second round swing on Jalen Hurts. Like, look what happens. Sometimes these guys hit. You don't have to hit very often for it to be right to take those kind of swings. It can change your whole franchise if Will Levis is it. So yeah, seems like good things for DeAndre Hopkins and the entire team right now. Thursday night, Will Levis versus Kenny Pickett. For the NFC now, we'll go alphabetical here. Atlanta will start with they lose this game to the Titans, as we just mentioned. So what happened in this game is Desmond Ridder got hit, looked like he got checked for a concussion, gets cleared, but then doesn't come back in the game. So Ridder ends up with 12 pass attempts. Taylor Heineke, who many of us have been calling for a while now, Heineke goes 12 of 21 for 175 and a touchdown. After the game, or actually on Monday, Arthur Smith was asked if Desmond Ridder is healthy, will he be the starter? And he, hemmed and hawed and said, we'll see. This was just 1 week after this idiot said that it was toxic groupthink that Desmond Ridder was being criticized. Now he's thinking about benching, and actually probably already did bench in that game because Desmond Ridder got cleared for Taylor Heineke. So, Evan, what do you think of the decision to go with Heineke? What do you think about the Falcons going forward?
I don't know what to think about your opinion of Arthur Smith, because is he an idiot or is he the coach of the year?
I wish he was coach of the year, but he flubbed me.
I think that they should just go with Heineke. 5 sacks on 17 dropbacks, potentially concussed, I guess not concussed, sat down. I don't think that they're moving forward on offense. They're not making any progress offensively with Desmond Ridder. He had the one good game like a month ago, and other than that, he's been a liability. He's frail out there. He's not strong in the pocket. He's not strong with the football. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that they should sit him down for a few games. Taylor Heineke can give you a few good games. We've seen that. He usually ends up petering out because, he just doesn't have a ton of talent as a player. But I don't think Desmond Ridder has shown that he has a ton of talent as a player either.
I think the Falcons will be more fun with Heineke. He'll be more accurate down the field, I think. And I think he'll just have better command in general if that's the way that they decide to go. But I kind of think that they're going to go back to Ridder here, but we'll certainly see. Either way, for both quarterbacks, not great. Drake London pulled his groin in this game. They say it's not as bad as they originally feared, but we'll see on Drake London's status. The only other note that I had here was Bijan Robinson was back in his normal role. Not a workhorse role, but back in his normal role here, splitting base work with Tyler Algier. Bears. So I'll get to the trade they made in a second here, but they did go to the Chargers in that Sunday night game, and they got absolutely stomped. The Velus Jones touchdown drop was absurd, but still, this is kind of what we'd expect from a Tyson Bagent offense. Justin Fields is not expected back for week 9. He's still week to week. In the meantime, Bears give up a round 2 pick to get Montez Sweat from the Commanders. Now, this is a bit counterintuitive. If you're rebuilding as the Bears are, you don't typically give up a round 2 pick, but I saw some smart people out there saying that this was actually a sharp move. What did you think of the Bears giving up a round 2 pick to get Montez Sweat? Anything else on the Bears?
Well, I think that Bill Barnwell did a good job of breaking down. Bill Barnwell breaks down trades and transactions better than anybody. And he did a good job of very simplistically breaking this down. They paid out a second-round pick that's probably going to be a real high second-round pick. And even in a best-case scenario for them, a massive, high value deal on the free agent market. If the Bears had not made this trade, they would still have a really high second-round pick, and they have plenty of money to go invest in the best pass rusher on the market. You know what I mean? So if you look at it from an opportunity cost standpoint, which every GM should be doing, Ryan Poles really made a big mistake here, I think. And, it kind of reminds me of the Chase Claypool situation. Not that Montez Sweat is going to end up being, a complete and utter negative zero for the team like Chase Claypool was, but it seemed like an ill-advised deal to me. Matt Eberflus has already announced that Tyson Bagent is going to start another game. So Justin Fields isn't healthy yet. I don't know. I didn't like the deal at all, man.
I totally agree with all that. I think the counter argument people were making is that pass rushers of this ilk do not actually hit the open market, which who knows? We'll probably never know if it's true or not, but it seems to me like it was a risk worth taking. Second round pick to a rebuilding team is very, very valuable.
Well, who was gonna hit the market? Montez Sweat.
Yeah.
Because obviously the Commanders had no intention of keeping him.
Yep.
And Chase Young is probably going to hit the market too. I don't know. This past year, it was a really strong market for defensive linemen. So I don't think that that's the case. I think that that's the case with quarterbacks, but not for defensive line.
Last note I had on this Bears game was Roschon Johnson returned, but they used 3 running backs. I mean, Foreman got 11 opportunities. We saw that coming after he played so well in week 7. Roschon Johnson came back and got 10 opportunities. I believe he got 4 targets, which, he continues to earn targets, which is a good sign. Darrington Evans was still in the mix, though, for 8 opportunities. So, man, I mean, 3-headed backfield here is bad with Bagent. With Justin Fields, it'll be like completely unacceptable. And also we have Khalil Herbert coming back at some point too. So it's a mess right now in the backfield for the Bears. Cowboys. I mean, Rams just went in here and laid a massive egg. Cowboys were all over them. They came out with an outrageously throw-heavy approach. The most throw-heavy approach that we've seen from the Cowboys all year, sent their PROE to the moon. Dak was unreal awesome in this game, and it was almost all to CeeDee Lamb. Yeah, Jake Ferguson had a really good game, which was nice, but this was a career game for CeeDee Lamb. I want to get to the Tony Pollard stuff in a second, Evan, but what do you think of Dallas's easy win over the Rams?
Yeah, it was good to see them coming out and showing that they could play explosive offense and execute in scoring position, because they had kind of struggled to do both of those things early in the season. They were very much relying on their defense to win games. The Cowboys have now won 11 games in a row. You remember when Jerry World opened for the first couple of years, they were saying that it wasn't even a home field advantage. But now they won 11 in a row at home. Looks like Tyron Smith will be back this week from a neck injury. CeeDee Lamb over his last two games, 19 catches for 275 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 receptions of 15 or more yards. Yeah. So he's showing that he can be, not just the power slot receiver, but also, and in this game, he won from outside quite a bit. So, that makes him, the usage in this game kind of reminded me of how the Vikings used Justin Jefferson, where you remember there was like talk that he was going to be the next Cooper Kupp under Kevin O'Connell. No, not really. I mean, he's been primarily an outside receiver, but they just get him in advantageous situations wherever he is on the field. And you love to see the Cowboys doing that with CeeDee Lamb.
I spent like a full 5 or 10 minutes on Tony Pollard on the solo pod. Hopefully you guys go back and listen to that just to get a general take off here on Tony Pollard. If you told me that the Cowboys scored 43 points in this game against the Rams, I would have thought Tony Pollard had like 30 DraftKings points, but that's how it's gone this year. They have been putting up huge numbers defensively, pass game, whatever. And Tony Pollard has not gotten a big piece of it. Now, the concern on Tony Pollard is that he actually hasn't been running that well. Talked about on the solo pod. I mean, he's 5th worst in the NFL in rush yard over expectation around dust balls like Latavius Murray and Dalvin Cook. He's also only 40th out of 59 runners in Pro Football Focus's grades. He hasn't been great, but you don't have to be great to succeed in this offense. So I still think it's been a little bit fluky on Tony Pollard's output. He also had a screen go off his face in this game at like the 10-yard line that if he caught it clean, probably would have gone for a touchdown. So I don't know. I gave my take on Tony Pollard. Evan, I think people are curious on your level of panic right now on Tony Pollard.
Well, I know that the statistics show that they've been running him up the middle way more this year than they did last, when they made it a priority to get Tony Pollard on the perimeter, number 1. Number 2, Tony Pollard has 4 or fewer targets in 5 of 7 games. So they haven't made it a priority to get him the ball in the passing game, on the perimeter, or in space. And that, to me, that's them working against his strengths.
Yeah. And that's Mike McCarthy, man. And maybe I should have thought about that more before the season. Like, Mike McCarthy can really mess this up for Tony Pollard. And I don't think that's all to blame, but I think that's at least part of it. Lions on Monday night, last night, get a very professional win over the Raiders at home. With Dave Montgomery out again, you get the massive Jahmyr Gibbs game, 26 carries, 152 yards, and a touchdown. Also 5 catches, 37 yards. They're heading into their bye. And after that, Dave Montgomery's expected back. So I think, given how well Gibbs has played, I think he's earned more. But Dave Montgomery was playing so well before, too. I'm curious, Evan, before we get to the DPJ trade, what you think of Montgomery-Gibbs split when the Lions come out of their bye.
I think that, I don't want to say they'll go back to Montgomery as the lead back and Jahmyr Gibbs as the change of pace. But I mean, I definitely think it's going to go back to near 50-50. I thought that it was promising that Dan Campbell, who's been a guy who's been relatively honest and straightforward with the media, talking about players and things of that nature. Check the Coach Speak Index best account on X these days. But he was talking about like Jahmyr Gibbs has made like noticeable improvement in the ways that we can trust him. That was the issue early in the season. And I think that he's getting to the point where they trust him more. They should also get back Frank Ragnow, who's one of the best centers in the league. He didn't even play in this game.
Yep.
And he missed with calf and toe injuries. He should be back after the bye. They acquired Donovan Peoples-Jones from the Browns. My first inclination toward what this meant, because Donovan Peoples-Jones is like kind of like a big, long Marquez Valdez-Scantling sort of theoretical deep threat sort of player. That may not reflect positively on where they stand on Jameson Williams, who's been all over the place.
He's and not good, I think, for the most part. I mean, catch rate has been so bad through his career. I think they just think he's not ready. But also, they needed talent at wide receiver. Marvin Jones is gone. Khalif Raymond isn't it. Josh Reynolds, has been mediocre at best. And so I think just adding a talent like DPJ for a 6th-round pick was a sharp move from the Lions. He's also a Detroit guy, which is what it is. If you had Jameson Williams on your team, like I've been carrying Jameson Williams on some teams, I think I'm just going to drop him. Like, the DPJ trade is probably the final straw. Packers. God, it's ugly now for the Packers. They're down to 2-5 on the year. The quarterback play from Jordan Love, and Evan was on this. I thought Jordan Love would be better than he's been. I don't think he'd be good, but I thought he's been better than he's been. He's been absolutely awful. And these balls that Christian Watson's getting, like, he got 8 more targets. He got a bunch of end zone looks. His expected fantasy points is going to look great, but a lot of it is just like jump ball prayer stuff from a bad quarterback that is not very accurate. So just more quarterback woes and offensive woes in general for this Packers team. What do you think of their latest loss, Evan, this time a home game to the Vikings in which they only scored 10 points?
Yeah, it's poor quarterback play. It's poor offensive line play. It's the injury to Aaron Jones. Their offense is kind of broken right now. I don't know if there's any light at the end of the tunnel, at least for the remainder of the 2023 season.
Yeah, it's sad. I think Christian Watson will continue to get volume, and it's going to look like really good volume. I'd be careful with some of that, like I said. But again, I'm not dropping Christian Watson. I don't drop players who can get 7, 8, 9 targets down the field and are talented. It's just not a drop.
I mean, there's just, for the past couple weeks, it's just been a lot of A.J. Dillon.
Yeah.
And that has meant a lot of ineffective plays.
Let's go to the Rams. I mean, like I said, they went to Dallas and just got absolutely lit up by the Cowboys right out of the gate. No shot. The story of the game for the Rams was Matthew Stafford hurt his throwing thumb, a UCL sprain in his throwing thumb. Now, they're saying that he's day-to-day. Doesn't sound serious. Maybe he could start week 9. If not, sounds like he'll probably be back in the next 1 to 2 weeks. Backup is Brett Rippon, of course, son of Mark Rippon, famously won the Super Bowl for Washington a long time ago. But yeah, obviously going to Brett Rippon is not good. Cooper Kupp, 10 targets in this game, only catches 4 of them. It's not good vibes around the Rams right now. Evan, what do you think of their game in Dallas?
Yeah, and it's always easy to say in hindsight, but when your starting quarterback completes 13 passes, for 162 yards, like none of the pass catchers are going to get there. Tyler Higbee wound up being the best receiver on the team at 5 for 47. Nobody gets there. They got dominated. It was somewhat predictable, I believe, because the Cowboys are just so much more talented in their defensive front seven than are the Rams up front. So the Rams have a week 10 bye. We're heading into week 9. The Rams have a week 10 bye. They're coming up on a cold weather game at Lambeau, and Stafford has a throwing thumb injury. And look, Stafford is like the toughest, one of the toughest dudes in the NFL. So he may just be like, "Oh no, I'm playing," and then McVay will be like, "Hey, if you say you're playing, then you're playing." But this would be kind of a sensible time to hold Matthew Stafford out of one game, give him the 2 weeks, and then he comes back in week 11.
Yeah, I mean, this was such a OLDL mismatch. Thorne talked about it. I mean, we knew that Stafford was going to have no time in this game, and they were just all over him. Running back note, Myles Gaskin was active, but wasn't really a factor. Darrell Henderson looks like they're going to ride with him as the 1A. They've done that 2 straight weeks now. 15 more opportunities for Darrell Henderson, 9 opportunities for Royce Freeman here, and Henderson is better in the pass game too. Clearly the better fantasy asset. Saints. So these games against the Colts, I mean, they get really wild because the Colts play so fast and their secondary is so bad. And that's what happened again. 38-27, Saints win a wild one. You get the big Shaheed plays. You get a big Taysom game. You get another big Alvin Kamara game. The panic around the fantasy community right now, Evan, is on Chris Olave. I have some thoughts on him, but I'm curious what you think of the Saints game against the Colts and any Olave thoughts going forward.
Well, he's seen one of the higher rates of uncatchable targets in the NFL. I know he's top 10 last time I checked. And, he's playing. I mean, Alvin Kamara gets layup targets. Michael Thomas gets layup targets. Rashid Shaheed is just, I don't know, like I know he's not Tyreek Hill, but it reminds me of Tyreek Hill because he wouldn't meet the thresholds that you want to see in terms of target volume. He wouldn't meet the thresholds that you want to see in terms of just sheer offensive playing time, but the dude is like an incredible game breaker.
Yeah.
So he's kind of breaking the model right now, and he's warranted a bigger role. Taysom Hill has carved out a bigger role. And so I think that at the beginning of the season, we thought that Chris Olave was kind of going to own that go-to offensive player role. I'm not sure that he has that right now. And it's a particularly disappointing in a game like this because the Colts have been just getting flamed by perimeter receivers, and that's what Chris Olave is.
Yeah, I'll say 2 things. First, he was wide open for like a 50-yard touchdown. Ball, somehow he like lost it. It hit him right off the helmet. I mean, that would have been a 50-yard touchdown, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Second, it feels like there's a lot of target competition, and there is, but Chris Olave is still earning 25% of the targets here at a 14.2-yard ADOT. That's pretty strong. And he's still at 9.6 targets per game. That's pretty strong on just raw volume. So I don't know, man. Like a lot of it's been uncatchable. The quarterback play has been bad, but I'm certainly not giving up on Chris Olave right now. And if people want to be selling low on Olave, I'll certainly be buying. Giants. So this game, man, I don't know how the Giants lost this game to the Jets. It was so weird, the end. But anyways, Tyrod Taylor goes down in this game. Darren Waller went down also with a hamstring issue. This guy just cannot avoid pulling his hamstring. They have to go to Danny DeVito. I'm sorry, Tommy DeVito. He looks like a mess out there. They end up completing 6 passes. Giants quarterback completed 6 passes in this game and still should have won it. Good news is we're expecting Daniel Jones back here for their next game. Evan, what'd you think of Giants' latest ugly game?
I mean, there's nothing going right outside of maybe Saquon Barkley and Darren Waller last week. Nothing is going right. The offensive line has been like the worst in the league all season. Their quarterbacks have been injured. They're one of the worst teams in the league, and so I think we got to kind of embrace that. Touch totals for Saquon Barkley the last 3 weeks though: 28, 24. 39. So at least we have something that we can hang our hat on there. And hopefully he can hold up physically under this kind of workload because that's difficult to do. And that's been difficult for Saquon Barkley to do throughout his career.
No, they're trying to kill him. I mean, they're trying to kill him. He had 36 carries and 5 targets in this game. 36 carries and 5 targets for Saquon Barkley. Completely ridiculous. But yeah, I think getting Daniel Jones back, after like resetting his whole thing will be a benefit. Losing Darren Waller, though, is brutal. And this guy's had so many hamstring injuries. It seems like it's just going to be another recurring type of hamstring thing for Darren Waller. Eagles got down early to the Commanders. And I was like, oh, man, when they got down early, I was like, oh, man, here we go. Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are about to go completely nuke And that's what happens. We get a big Devontae game, 799-1, but yet again, that is dwarfed by an outrageous A.J. Brown game. Made some absurd catches here, 8-132. I mean, Eagles pass game looks unstoppable right now. Evan, what do you think of Eagles' latest win, this time over the Commanders?
Yeah, and they've been able to overcome a sort of high rate of turnovers, especially by Jalen Hurts himself this season. And they're still just destroying on offense. A.J. Brown, 6 games of 125 plus receiving yards or more, which is an NFL record. I took him at 50-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year 2 weeks ago, and he's down to 10-1. Yeah. It's still going to be tough to overcome Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey, though. But I'm feeling pretty good about that bet right now. Knock on wood. He's just a freaking monster out there. I mean, he's unbelievable. Really yeah. So I don't really have anything else to add to that.
I did notice that Jalen Hurts was like limping, and he came into this game with a knee issue, and he wasn't on the final injury report. He was obviously playing, but he just looked like at times he was limping. I don't think it affected his game, but just something to note. And the report from Glazer, I believe, was that it's a bone bruise for Jalen Hurts in his knee. Obviously, he can play through it, but it's a real thing. San Francisco, everybody's piling on Purdy now. There are so many Purdy "I told you so" guys out there right now. Really bad throws in this game against the Bengals. Some really bad interceptions. This is 49ers' 3rd straight loss. So lost that game to Minnesota, lost to Cleveland, and now lose to the Bengals. I think the Purdy haters have gone too far.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the Purdy people who said he was going to be the MVP, and by the way, I did take Purdy to be MVP at like 22-1. That looks pretty dead now, but yeah, somewhere in between there, I think, on Purdy. But yeah, Evan, what do you think of Purdy and the 49ers' latest loss? 3 straight losses now for the 49ers.
I mean, he has made some inopportune errors at inopportune times, and that has kind of hurt the 49ers. But I mean, they averaged 8 yards per play in this game. Like, well, this is one of the things that I got right this past week was the over on this game. And they kind of held up their bargain at least a little bit, but it was mostly about Cincinnati, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. And that'll be an actually fun conversation. I mean, I think that Brock Purdy is like, he's fine. There's no reason for them to go to Sam Darnold at this point. He really hasn't executed the offense poorly. It's just they've run into some roadblocks. Trent Williams being out has not helped. Deebo Samuel being out as a high percentage playmaker who can turn short stuff into long gains, that has not helped. In this game, they lost Aaron Banks, probably their second best offensive lineman, to a turf toe injury. I do think that he might be able to return after the bye. But I'm not worried about Brock Purdy. I think he's going to be all right.
Splits with Deebo out, and I do expect Deebo back, but just as a reminder, it's so absurd. Like George Kittle in these games that Deebo missed, last 6 that Deebo has missed, 9-149, 578, 423-1, 6-122, 493-2, 339-1. I mean, Kittle just smashes when Deebo isn't out there. Other note, Christian McCaffrey role. I mean, he played all but 2 snaps again in this game. It's just so outrageous. His role and talent level. So clearly the number 1 overall pick. Bucks lost that game on Thursday night to the Bills. Was certainly far from a thriller. Got the late Mike Evans bomb to kind of save his day. Evan, I did not have many other takeaways from this Bucks game beyond that. What did you think of their loss up in Buffalo?
Just that the offense as a unit has really come crashing back down to earth. Over their last 3 games, Tampa Bay has put up point totals of 6, 13, and 18, and that's against, well, I think the Lions were playing good defense at that point, but the Falcons are not any kind of a defensive juggernaut, and then this past week, like the Bills are the most injured defense in the league. So the air has kind of come out of the balloon for the Buccaneers offense, and I don't think anybody is really like surprised by that because that's kind of what people expected entering the season.
Last NFC team is the Washington football team, aka the Commanders. I mean, I thought they played well enough to win, and probably against most or all other NFL teams in this game, the Commanders probably win. Howell goes off again, this time nearly 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, only took 1 sack, which was a miracle. He got the ball out way quicker, 2.48 seconds to release this game for Sam Howell. That was the fastest of the season. The story, of course, today is that they have blown up their defense. Chase Young and Montez Sweat are both gone now. I mean, this defense was already probably my favorite team to play opposing players against, and now their defense is going to be even worse. So, Evan, any thoughts on the game or any thoughts on the Sweat and Chase Young trades?
I mean, I just don't have anything to add to the. Yeah, I mean, they're just going to be a shootout team the rest of the way, and they did not trade Jacoby Brissett, correct? Yeah. Correct. So I was kind of hoping that they would trade Jacoby Brissett because then that would lock in Sam Howell the rest of the way. Ron Rivera is like on his last legs in Washington. Clearly, you know, they're giving up. They're owned by Josh Harris. You would know better than me. They're, you know, their new owner. He was the 76ers co-owner.
Yep. And Devils. He traded James Harden, Montez Sweat, and Chase Young all in one day. Quite a day for Josh Harris.
We finally get a big Jahan Dotson game. No Chris Rodriguez in this one. We had talked about him potentially carving out a legitimate role. And then we got another good one from Logan Thomas. I think we're going to continue to get a ton of dropbacks from Washington. Sam Howell shockingly only took 1 sack on 53 dropbacks in this game. But as you mentioned, with the defensive losses, with the way that they play, I mean, this is a bad team that is good in fantasy. Shades of Blake Bortles, Allen Robinson, those guys back in the day.
Yep, for sure. I think that the Curtis Samuel toe thing was a factor here, and I think that's something to watch going forward. I'm not sure if Curtis Samuel is going to be able to keep playing through this. The other thing that I wanted to mention was on the Chase Young trade. We didn't mention it on San Francisco, but my God, Evan, San Francisco's defensive line add Chase Young to this group now, and all they had to give up was a 3rd-round pick. I was just curious what you thought of San Francisco's decision to make that move to give up a 3rd-rounder to get Chase Young.
I mean, I think that, I mean, if we're just going to juxtapose it against what the Bears did for Montez Sweat, I mean, I would much rather, I think that the second round, like especially the early second round is such a hot spot, especially in recent years. People have just been, I mean, teams have just been picking off studs that for whatever reason fall out of the first round. You know, I would just much rather have a 2nd-round pick, a high 2nd-round pick than anything in the 3rd round. And so, I love that move from San Francisco. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially because San Francisco's pass rush had sort of hit a wall a little bit. So just to inject it with a little bit more talent, they recently picked up Randy Gregory off the scrap heap. Mm-hmm. You remember the game where Kirk Cousins like kind of cut him up? Actually, not kind of, fully cut him up, didn't take a single sack. They were very smart to inject a little bit more pass rush into that front.
Move to the AFC now. Start here with the Baltimore Ravens. Went to Arizona. I thought they'd be super efficient. They were not. You know, I know they scored 31 points, but they really couldn't sustain much. They sat on the ball for the entire 4th quarter, but they scored 31 points. They get a win. Gus Edwards ends up being the one that goes off, 3 touchdowns and 80 rushing yards on 19 carries. Evan, what do you think of Ravens win out there in Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, I expected a bigger game from Lamar, considering the matchup, considering how he played in the previous game. But as you mentioned, like they just, you know, they were never really pushed. Arizona did rack up a bunch of garbage time points, but, you know, big Gus Edwards game, sometimes games just play out like this. Lamar wound up with 157 passing yards, so none of the receivers went off. We're happy to take the touchdown from Mark Andrews, but, you know, we had a lot of questions about like Zay Flowers, and hopefully you played the other guy.
Yeah. The thing about Gus Edwards is I thought they were trying to replace him, right? There were a lot of rumors around Ravens and running backs leading up to the trade deadline. They ended up doing nothing. And so, Gus Edwards in the right spots is going to be playable. Like he's not going to have 3 touchdown games, but he's going to be playable in the right spots. Obviously, a game against Arizona is one of the best spots he'll have all season.
There was a report that there was a deal in place between the Ravens and the Titans, but the Titans owner nixed it. But then that was shot down by some Titans reporters, but who knows?
Yeah. And I mean, I get that. Derrick Henry sells tickets. You don't want to give him up for like a 5th round pick or whatever teams think that he's worth, but probably should have done it. So Bills beat Tampa in that Thursday night football game. This was the first game without Dawson Knox due to that wrist issue. And predictably, Bills' 3 wide receiver usage spiked massively. And the main beneficiary was Khalil Shakir. He ran 33 routes on 46 dropbacks. Sherfield only 15. Deontay Hardy 4. We also saw Gabe Davis get way more layup targets. Like he never gets layup targets. And in this game, he got layup targets, which was a huge, huge boost to Gabe Davis's value. I don't know how sticky that will be. Evan, what do you think of Bills stuff in that first game without Knox?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, and Khalil Shakir has been like the Bills' primary slot receiver. So it is possible that now in the absence of Dawson Knox, and he'll have to miss 3 more games, they're going to go heavy on 11 personnel, 3 receiver, because they were like a base 2 tight end offense to begin the year. And Khalil Shakir could end up with like quite a bit of playing time over the Bills' next 3 games. We've got some heavier weeks with buys coming up, and so Khalil Shakir could be useful in the right matchups. James Cook, he's been kind of like a roller coaster this year. He's got 4 targets over the Bills' last 3 games.
So I was concerned of the Leonard Fournette signing because of this, right? And so I think Leonard Fournette is like total dust. There's a reason he's been out of the league for literally, 9 months or whatever it's been, with nobody really even kicking the tires on him. But Leonard Fournette has always been reasonably good in the pass game. And if the Bills think that James Cook isn't it in the pass game, I could see him eating in a little bit there. But I would not be adding Leonard Fournette really anywhere. Do you have any take on Leonard Fournette's role going forward? I do think that this is a sign that Damian Harris's neck injury is pretty serious.
That's how I would lean. And also Latavius Murray's 33 years old. So I think that Leonard Fournette is a replacement for Damian Harris and an insurance policy for Latavius Murray, but he also is a player that teams throughout the years have trusted to pass block. So that's a little bit of a concern for James Cook. But yeah, I mean, it's just weird because James Cook was considered to be like a primarily like a pass catching back coming out of college, and the Bills have used him as just like a dynamic rusher.
Yep. Bengals, really good win for the Bengals. They go into San Francisco, get a win. Wasn't really all that close. Again, a really, really pass-heavy approach from the Bengals in this game. In the last 5 weeks, Bengals lead the entire NFL in pass rate over expectation. Burrow certainly looks healthy to me. He's even out there running a bit more. T. Higgins came back for this game. There was a report that proved to be false, quite frankly. There's a report that he would be a decoy in this game. I mean, he was not. He ran 31 routes on 38 dropbacks, 6 targets for a 19% share. There were trade rumors around T. Higgins, which I never really thought would come to fruition because the Bengals are in their window to win now. And even if they're going to let T. Higgins walk, like they have to try to win the Super Bowl this year, I think. So anyways, Evan, what do you think of Bengals win at San Francisco?
It was just an awesome Joe Burrow game. And on Monday, I looked at the MVP odds, and I saw Joe Burrow sitting there at 22-1. And I hit that. And I really like that because no other quarterbacks have really stood out to the extent that people are even talking about like A.J. Brown and Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill potentially winning NFL MVP, but they can't win NFL MVP because you have to be a quarterback to win NFL MVP, and that's actually the way that it should be, and it will continue to be that way. Burrow over his last 3 games, 78% completion rate, only 7 yards per pass attempt, but I mean he's been efficient. 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 54 rushing yards. The Bengals have won 3 straight. In weeks 1 through 4, on passes above 10 air yards, this is from Next Gen Stats, Joe Burrow in weeks 1 through 4, 29%, 0 TDs. In weeks 5 through 8, passes of 10 plus air yards, 17 of 28, 61%, 4 touchdowns. And now in prime time, they're about to face the Bills' depleted defense in a game that everybody's going to be watching against another quarterback who could potentially be an MVP candidate in Josh Allen. This is a home game for the Bengals. I mean, I would get, if you could get down like 18-1 Joe Burrow, I think that's a pretty good bet for MVP.
I like it. And I think the Bengals will play well in that home game against the Bills. That's coming up. Really big game Sunday night. Other note that I had here, Joe Mixon actually looked good. Like if you watch that game, that was like the most spry I've seen Mixon look in a really long time. It was his first game over 5 yards per carry since November of last year. In other words, it's been like a full calendar year since in a single game this guy even averaged 5 yards per carry. He did it here against San Francisco. So a glimmer of hope, I think, for Joe Mixon, who's looked so sluggish. Cleveland. PJ Walker goes out to Seattle, almost gets a win after beating San Francisco at home and the Colts on the road. I mean, he threw a brutal late interception off a helmet to cost them the game. But yeah, Browns were in it once again. They made the DPJ trade today, seemingly signaling that they want to get Marquise Goodwin, Cedric Tillman more involved in their pass game. Evan, what do you think of Browns' loss out there in Seattle and the DPJ trade?
They just were doing nothing with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, he had 8 catches for 97 yards to this point in the season. I think that the next man up will be Cedric Tillman, but it could be a combination of him and Marquise Goodwin. Marquise Goodwin has played ahead of Cedric Tillman to this point, but Jake Trotter, who covers the Browns, said that Cedric Tillman was drafted specifically to be the replacement for Donovan Peoples-Jones because Donovan Peoples-Jones' contract is up after this year. Just a little bit on Cedric Tillman. I know that there were some scouts that thought that he was the best Tennessee wide receiver prospect and not Jalen Hyatt, but Cedric Tillman got hurt a lot in college, and so there was no clear separation. But when both guys were healthy, Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, the people that watched Tennessee extensively thought that Cedric Tillman was featured more than Hyatt in the Tennessee offense, for whatever that's worth. Big receiver, not a ton of speed, but was productive when he played in college. David Njoku doesn't have a touchdown on the season, which is frustrating. And tight end production is so dependent upon just getting in the end zone. But his target shares are way up in recent weeks with PJ Walker at quarterback. Doesn't necessarily translate to efficiency, but you'd rather see him targeted heavily than not.
David Njoku did score his first touchdown of the season in this game against the Seahawks. I know that because I played him a bunch, thankfully. But yeah, David Njoku, I think, is just a good player who's playing almost every snap right now. ADOT's been poor, but I still like Njoku.
Yeah, my bad. Did not have a touchdown until this past week.
Yep. The running back situation, I can't believe Jerome Ford played. Like, he had an alleged high ankle sprain. In the first half, it was almost all Kareem Hunt. But then they bring in Jerome Ford. Just weird, man. Like, if he was going to play, I don't know. Just weird to not give him a break.
And Jerome and Pierre Strong got in there a decent amount too and didn't look bad at all.
Deshaun Watson not expecting back anytime soon. I mean, we talked about it last week. Just cannot throw the football right now. So, yeah, expecting PJ Walker going forward. Denver. I mean, maybe the Broncos should play the Chiefs every week. The best I've seen the Broncos play is their 2 games against the Chiefs this year. This time they get an actual win over the Chiefs. Really great to see Javonte Williams coming off of that 3 ligament tear in his knee, ramping up to a full workload, season high in snaps. 27 carries was a season high. 75% of the running back opportunities was a season high for Javonte Williams. All good stuff there. They win the game, though, by somehow holding Patrick Mahomes down for the entire game. Obviously, Mahomes had the flu. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, Evan, what do you think of Broncos win over the Chiefs?
So here's a stat from the Associated Press. The Broncos had 87 net passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns in Week 8 against the Chiefs. The last team with fewer than 100 net passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns was Jay Schrader's Raiders back in 1992. They played really good defense for the second time against Patrick Mahomes' Chiefs. I don't know to what extent the illness influenced them, but the Broncos were like a historically bad defense early in the season, and it doesn't necessarily always stay that way. The big notes that we have are that the Broncos didn't trade anyone at the deadline, and they were heavily rumored to be interested in dealing Jerry Jeudy and or Cortland Sutton. So, another air ball from Marvin Mims. And, is there any light at the end of the tunnel there?
I don't think so. I mean,
I don't think so either.
He ran the same amount of routes in this game. Brandon Johnson was on IR, and Marvin Mims still didn't see a role expansion. He ran the same amount of routes as little Jordan Humphrey as they just played number 3 role. And Russ completed 12 passes in this game, and that's going to be the way it is a lot of weeks. Let's go to Houston. Really, really disappointing offensive performance for Houston here against Carolina. Carolina was 0-6 coming in. Houston was just way more run heavy in this game than I thought they'd be. I mean, we had only 27 dropbacks for Stroud and 30 designed runs from the running backs. Like, I thought they'd be way more throw heavy here. I thought it was a good spot for Nico, a good spot for Tank Dell. I don't know what happened here, honestly, Evan. What do you think of Houston's loss to Carolina?
It was brutal, especially as someone who, went through all the stuff entering the week and was like, yo, CJ Stroud should cook here. Nico's in a great spot. Tank Dell's back. They should be a little healthier on the offensive line. Jarrett Patterson, their center, breaks his ankle in this game. And they just got out coached by the Panthers. And, this is coming from someone who has been really high on Bobby Slowick, the Texans offensive coordinator. The Panthers played extreme pass coverage in this game, dropping guys, and kind of dared the Texans to run. And the Texans did run. I mean, they had 30 rushing attempts and 24 pass attempts, and they still couldn't run the ball. Even against a Panthers defense that was already getting smashed by the run and was daring them and was built up to stop the pass in this game. So I think it was a matter of coaching almost. And the Texans running game has been a disaster all season.
Yeah. And they continue to give Devin Singletary so much work where, if you want to run the ball 30 times, I'd rather see more. Dameon Pierce, clearly they don't see it that way. 12 carries for Pierce in this game, 10 for Singletary. Like, if you're in a shallow league and you had to drop Dameon Pierce, it's not the end of the world. We had a question on the waiver show. Yeah. Like, would you rather have Brian Robinson or Dameon Pierce? I think that's close, but I'd probably rather have Brian Robinson at this point. Not great right now for Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, the Panthers, it seemed like they were hell-bent on making sure that on their home turf, they were not going to let the guy that the quarterback that they passed on smoke them, and that wound up leading to a victory.
Let's go to the Colts, lose this game to the Saints at home. The Jonathan Taylor situation was so weird. First half, he is shredding. 11 carries, 94 yards. Second half, Jonathan Taylor gets 1 carry and 1 target. I thought I saw him limping. I wouldn't swear to it. I thought I saw him limping a bit. After the game, Shane Steichen was asked about this. He says, no, Jonathan Taylor was not hurt. We just decided to go with more Zach Moss. I don't know if I believe him. Moss obviously played well again, despite coming in as a true game time decision. I don't know, man. Like, paying Jonathan Taylor $25 million and then not playing him at all in the second half after he went 11-94 in the first half is mind-boggling to me. Do you have any read on that, Evan? Any other thoughts on the Colts?
My best guess is that, and I'm trusting Steichen a little bit here, is that the Colts trust Zach Moss more, or that he's earned that role as like more of the passing down back. Now, he only had 1 target in this game, but that they trust him more on passing downs to do what they need on passing downs, and they were behind in the second half. So that would be my best guess, but I'm with you. It was surprising, and I don't know. We'll have to look at the injury reports to see if Jonathan Taylor is on there this week.
Gardner Minshew has started 4 games this year. In those, Josh Downs, 21% target share. Michael Pittman, 27% target share. But man, is there so much volume because they play so fast? 8 catches, 5 catches, 5 catches, 7 catches for Josh Downs in Minshew's 4 starts. This remains an offense that I think is super fantasy friendly because of the way that they're playing.
And it's also fairly narrow. because other than those guys, and they play a bunch of, theoretical pass catchers. They play like 3-4 tight ends at times. The Alec Pierce hasn't done anything all year. It's a very narrow target distribution with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs clearly at the top.
Jacksonville Jaguars get a somewhat easy win in the rain against the Steelers. Defense continues to play well. I don't think people realize how well Jacksonville's defense has played. They hold Pickett/Trubisky to just 191 pass yards on 43 attempts here. Another big Travis Etienne game, briefly left with some kind of ankle injury, it looked like, but came back in and looked totally fine. Jaguars are good, man. They can play D. They can find ways to win games. They can run the ball effectively. What do you think of Jaguars' latest win this time over the Steelers?
I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I do have some notes. Calvin Ridley had 5 for 72 in the first half. Like, it seemed to me like they really wanted to get him going. Where did he finish with? 6 for 83. So a decent game. I still think he's a buy in all formats. I love that they traded for Ezra Cleveland from the Vikings. This guy was a high second-round pick a few years back, and I don't know, I think that if you talk to Vikings fans, they'd say he's up and down, but he's a talented guy, and the Jaguars offensive line coach knows him from Minnesota, and he also has a history playing some tackle, so I like that. For the trajectory of the offense, Tank Bigsby loses a fumble.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, again, a team in ascent.
Only gave up a 6th-round pick to get Ezra Cleveland. I thought that was a pretty sharp move there from the Jaguars. Chiefs. So story comes out, I guess it was Saturday night, maybe Sunday morning. I can't remember, that Mahomes is sick. Added to the report is questionable. I brushed that off like the Amon-Ra St. Brown one where, in the wake of the Bijan stuff, anybody who has the sniffles is going to get listed now questionable, which I think they should. That's totally fair. Mahomes, though, seemed like he might have been actually sick. That's taking on a lot of the blame for the way that the Chiefs played in this game. Mahomes, 24 of 38 for 241, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I have no way to know how sick Mahomes was, but that's the second time that they've really struggled against the Broncos. Evan, what do you think of Chiefs' shocking loss in Denver?
Mm-hmm. And I'm over the course of the year, or the course of the really Mahomes' career, whenever the Chiefs get down, like, you want to bet on the Chiefs to come back and win, and that did not work out well in this one. I speak from personal experience. Was Taylor Swift at the game? Because there you go. Travis Kelce, scoreless, 58 yards. Rashee Rice led the Chiefs receivers in routes run, I believe, for the first time this season.
Yeah.
I think he was at 65% of the snaps.
I had 60%.
Okay.
60%, which was a downgrade from the previous week when Justin Watson was out, where he was at 65%. So, I think Rashee Rice will play somewhere between 60 and 70% of the routes the rest of the season. I don't think we're ever going to get to 100%, but still really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Justin Watson's just kind of a nuisance. I mean, he's never a fantasy factor, but he winds up running. I don't know. They love him as the dirty work player, the old Chris Conley role. And then Isaiah Pacheco didn't get there. It set up well for him theoretically on paper entering the game, but they fall behind, and he ain't going to help you in fantasy.
Awesome game this week, but I think it's in London, Chiefs, and it's in Germany. Chiefs Dolphins. Unfortunately, we're going to be depraved of from the main slate because this is a 9:30 a.m. Eastern start in Germany, which sucks, but that is an awesome game. Dolphins and Chiefs. Set your alarms for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Chargers. A really efficient Justin Herbert here, 31 of 40 for 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Still just a ton of short passes. And maybe it wasn't a Joe Lombardi thing. Ton of short passes to Eckler, ton of short passes to Keenan. But Eckler may not be 100%. I don't think he is 100%, but he still is so dominant in the pass game. What do you think of Chargers' easy win here?
A lot of short passes that went for big gains in this game. Justin Herbert had his lowest ADOT of the season. It was below 5 yards. Yeah. And, I mean, just a ton of Austin Eckler after the catch. Keenan Allen can do that stuff. Quentin Johnston finally did a little bit of something. Your boy Parham got in the zone.
Yep.
It was a smooth sailing win. The Bears are a bad team, and the Chargers, I don't know if they're a good team, but they certainly have a lot more talent than the Bears.
Gerald Everett missed this game, and like Donald Parham, obviously 443-1. Like, let this guy play more. He's probably better than Gerald Everett. Let him play more. But it was good to see Quentin Johnston. Josh Palmer tried to play in this game. Probably shouldn't have. I mean, he did not look like he was anywhere near healthy. So they get Quentin Johnston to catch 5 balls. That was at least a good jump start for him, as Evan mentioned.
Yeah. Josh Palmer was like clearly hindered and in and out of the lineup.
Vegas last night, man. I didn't think Jimmy G would be this bad. I mean, I knew leaving San Francisco is really hard to succeed, but I didn't think Jimmy G would be this bad. He had Devontae Adams twice wide open for bombs, missed him both times. Devontae is just like, I mean, he's ready to murder someone. I mean, he is just so pissed off, and it's hard to blame him. Did not get traded at the deadline, so they're going to play out the string here. Bad vibes around Las Vegas right now. Evan, what do you think of their loss last night in Detroit?
There were also like late deadline rumors that the Ravens were trying to get Josh Jacobs, but the Raiders wanted a second-round pick, and the Ravens weren't going to give up a second-round pick for a player in a contract year who hasn't really been playing that well. But, yeah, I mean, Jimmy G, I mean, just clearly frenetic in the pocket, doesn't trust the protection either. I think that can lead to errant throws. He was pressured on 72% of his dropbacks, took 6 sacks. Yeah, and the Lions got 9 hits on him on 27 dropbacks. So 33% of the time that he's dropping back, he's getting hit. So I don't know what to say. I think the Raiders should have sold everybody, but people are trying to keep their jobs.
They didn't even sell Hunter Renfrow. I mean, that was a no-brainer to me to try to trade Hunter Renfrow to someone. They didn't even do that. And not only did they not do that, they didn't even play Trey Tucker last night. Like, give the kid a chance. What's the point? I mean, Hunter Renfrow is giving you absolutely nothing out there. So weird. Miami, relatively easy win for the Dolphins over the Patriots. Tua Tagovailoa once again over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And again, the reason that I love playing Tua stuff in DFS so much is that when it hits, you know exactly where it's hitting. Tyreek and Waddle combined for more than 50% of the targets. Yet again, this time 55%. Evan, what do you think of Dolphins' easy win over the Patriots on Sunday?
Well, I think it stands out that Jalen Waddle's usage has been way up over the last 3 or 4 games because his usage was very disappointing early in the season. And when he's getting these targets, which he did pretty consistently throughout last year, just got out to a slow start. Like, he's got just as much, I mean, I don't want to say just as much explosiveness as Tyreek Hill, but he's awfully close. Durham Smythe came into this game with 1 target over his previous 3. He got 3, went 3 for 28, but still they're not interested in throwing the football to anybody else. And I think it makes perfect sense. And when they do it successfully, again, they're putting up 30 balls in the box score all day long. Jeff Wilson hopped over Salvan Ahmed as the number 2 back, and I think is worth rostering as a stash. But Devon Achane, I think, has 1 more game before he can come back from IR.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a split between Wilson and Ahmed for the 2/3 role, but yeah, I think it's going to be irrelevant once Devon Achane gets back. Obviously, Wilson will be an injury stash.
Probably, although I think that those guys at the top, especially Mostert, and we've already seen Achane get hurt. Like, these guys can go down, and opportunity. It sounds like Teron Armstead, the Dolphins left tackle, he's definitely going to travel to Germany against the Chiefs, and he may play. So, and their right tackle has been really good. Austin Jackson, awesome PFF grades.
New England lose this game. Miami, as we just mentioned, suffer a bigger loss. Kendrick Bourne is done for the year with the ACL. Kendrick Bourne has been maybe their best player this year. Pop Douglas has a case for that too. But man, they are a mess right now. They're top, and Devontae Parker had a concussion. He's probably out this week. Their top 3 wide receivers, you're looking at Pop Douglas, Jalen Reagor, who's like a borderline NFL player at this point, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who looks completely done and dusted out there. I don't know how you can even evaluate Mac Jones given the current state of the Patriots offense. But yeah, Evan, any thoughts on Patriots from their loss to the Dolphins?
Just that I think that Pop Douglas, although he's like a 6th-round pick, he's small. I mean, I think he's going to be the favorite for targets in New England the rest of the way. I mean, I think Juju Smith. Okay, all right, definitely. Certainly for air yards. So, I mean, I don't know, where does Sam have Pop Douglas in the waiver?
He has him slightly behind Trey McBride, but
Okay.
if you have tight end covered, Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas would be my number one ad if you have tight end covered already.
I love it. So would I. And it doesn't look like a great waiver wire week in general.
It is not. Jets. I don't know how the Jets won this game against the Giants. I mean, just laughable choke job from the Giants. Zach Wilson remains so bad, and like, I'm afraid it's going to catch up to Brees. Brees's play, all of his fantasy points in this game came from one play where he caught a literal pass right in front of him. And I tweeted this video. It's so absurd. And he eludes like 10 guys and scores on a 50-yard little dump off play. The way that Zach Wilson in this offense is playing is going to be a problem for Brees. Now, Brees can do things on his own. I'm not saying Brees is going to be bad. His usage is awesome. He's up to 81% of the running back opportunities, which is like among the league leaders. So Brees is obviously an awesome asset. But man, he's going to have to make so many of these plays on his own on a week-to-week basis. It's just something to be aware of. Evan, what do you think of Jets' wild win over the Giants?
Yeah, Brees Hall's continued ability to overcome like the worst offensive environment that you could possibly draw up is just astounding.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he'd be a great candidate for comeback player of the year if it wasn't going to go to Tua. The Jets, they lost their starting center in this game to a dislocated kneecap, Connor McGovern. They already had lost Elijah Vera Tucker. Dwayne Brown hasn't been able to get right. Joe Tippmann has been injured, their 2nd-round offensive lineman. They were desperate enough. They signed Roger Saffold today. Roger Saffold, 35 years old, has played for a bunch of teams, to their practice squad. He'll probably end up playing for them at some point. But yeah, I mean, the Brees Hall's ability to overcome that environment is unbelievable. The Giants shadowed Garrett Wilson with Deonte Banks, their 1st-round pick in this game. Garrett Wilson still went up going 7 for 100 on 13 targets. It's pretty impressive how Garrett Wilson also has been able to overcome the environment. But Zach Wilson will throw it to him, and that's what you need from a talented player. 13 targets, you like to see that.
I'm pretty confident that if Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt, and I'm no Aaron Rodgers fan, I thought he declined last year, but if he didn't get hurt, Garrett Wilson was going to have like a top 5 fantasy wide receiver season. I mean, guy is just really, really good at the game of football. Pittsburgh. Last one we're going to do here is a 20-10 home loss for the Steelers to the Jaguars. Pickett suffers a rib thing. Trubisky finishes it out. For what it's worth, Kenny Pickett says he will be playing Thursday against the Titans. The big note I had here is just Deontay Johnson, 14 targets, 32% share, and now he's getting targets deeper down the field. And I understand the touchdown concerns. I understand Matt Cannon does not scheme his players to be successful, but Deontay Johnson is one of the best wide receivers in the league. We have it earning targets, and now he's earning them further down the field. I know I keep talking about Deontay Johnson. It's just any guy who can get 7 to 10 targets every time he steps on the field is an interesting to me. Evan, what do you think of Steelers' loss to the Jaguars?
Yeah, and as Deontay Johnson makes his way back, then George Pickens goes back to running, fewer high percentage routes, and that was a big deal here. I mean, George Pickens had 5 targets, but 1 for 22. He had an awesome touchdown. He's a really talented player. He's over 100 yards. He had over 100 yards in each of the previous 2. But with Deontay Johnson coming back, it's a pretty like George Pickens now goes to like boom or bust.
Yeah. All right. That is going to do it for this edition of the Team by Team show. Appreciate everyone being here. Sorry for the delay, but we thought it was important to let the trade deadline play out before we went ahead and recorded this show. We'll be back on Thursday to talk awards markets. Some of the ones that Evan talked about, we'll certainly talk about on Thursday with Mr. Reynolds and Gary. And then Friday night, it is Establish the Show as usual with myself and Evan. For Producer Ryan, for producer Luke, for producer Steven, for producer Patrick, for all the producers, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.